On this week's episode, our new retro games reviews present Absolute Zero, an amazing platform puzzle game for Amiga, and InfeZtation, a run-and-gun platform game for the Commodore 64. But we have a third review this week, with the amazing O for ZX Spectrum Next. This week, also, we introduce a new section to our show, as we believe that the classic adventure games deserve a special mention. So we welcome our retro adventuring segment, and we begin by reviewing the amazing Snarl, a point-and-click horror adventure game, Paranoid, a new thriller text adventure, and let's not forget our Retrospect adventure game review with Quest for Glory 4, Shadows of Darkness. Our hardware review takes a closer look at the Sinden Light Gun, the modern way to play your retro light gun games. The DOS Vault opens to let us review the Fast and Furious Slipspeed, an incredible futuristic top-down racing game. And we remember the often underestimated FPS Blake Stone, Aliens of Gold. Lastly, in our history lesson, we learn about the Japanese invasion of the MSX and why it failed to conquer the world of computing. We hope you have fun! Our new retro games reviews begin with Absolute Zero, an Amiga game by Zener. This is a platform action puzzler that has more than a little common with the Solomon's Key classic game. Someone or something has disabled the climatic reactor to the labs you're working, and you must reboot each and every reactor again to prevent a new ice age. That's quite an air conditioner. Just like in the classic Solomon's Key, you get to create and destroy blocks, but in this game they take the form of huge ice cubes. But there is, of course, more to the gameplay here. You must collect at every stage the batteries for each reactor, and then reach them in order to plug them in and reboot the system. Sometimes you'll get access to blaster ammo to defend yourself or carve a path through the automatic defense systems that are your primary antagonists in the game. The game has wonderful animated colorful graphics, even though the color blue, as expected because of all the eyes, is dominant. There is a very rhythmic music that accompanies you throughout the game, and the sound effects are equally good. The controls won't give you any trouble, as they are pretty straightforward, with the joystick serving for the direction you want to go, or point to create an ice cube. The Phi key creates an ice cube, and prolonged pressure of it fires a blast if you have enough ammo. On to the rankings and the graphics. Receive a 9. The controls, a fair 9.1. The music and sound effects, a solid 8.9. And the gameplay, a 9.3, for a total of 9.1. This is a great game that is both a tribute and an upgrade to the classic Solomon's Key formula. Try it out! Our next game comes for the Commodore 64, and it's called InfeZtation by Monte. This is a run-and-gun platform game, and truly, it looks like the perfection of the formula. You play as a female character that is a galactic seraph and must explore a mysterious deep space science station with the assistance of your robot sidekick D3P-UT. You're equipped with an automatic blaster, and you must reach the exit of each stage you enter alive. You can blast your enemies to your heart's desire, and we must say that the shooting mechanism is especially satisfying. You get to collect a respectable amount of power-ups that can give you special abilities for long or short term. The controls are simple and include the directional keys, the shoot button and the jump button tied to the up direction that allows you to perform a double jump should you press it again immediately. There are boss battles, 36 levels to play through, and even passcodes to continue from certain areas. The graphics are great, even though the sprites are mostly single-colored. The music is atmospheric, and the sound effects are also great. Gameplay is addictive and challenging enough to make you want to come back for more, but never to frustrate you. A little downside is that if you lose before you reach a passcode area, you must play all the way from the start to that point again. The graphics get a solid 8.8. The controls a 9.2. The music and sound effects a 9. And the gameplay a well-earned 9.4 for a total of 9.1. If you like run-and-gun games and you own a Commodore 64 or an emulator, this is as good as it gets. We had a pretty good week for reviews this time, and so this is our third game review, and what a game! This is O for the ZX Spectrum Next by Fusion Retro Games. O is a puzzle platformer with a timer challenge, and it's simply one of the best games on the ZX Next. You play as Supervisor Retrobot, and after the mysterious villain O stole every single retro artifact from the DSS Fusion Retro Space Repository you're stationed, you must run and within an hour retrieve them all. The game is divided into 3 different zones, each with its own style, and spawns 50 levels of challenging puzzle action for you to get over. The graphics are simply amazing. Even though the sprites are small, they are amazingly animated and with wonderful detail that makes them feel like tiny cartoon characters. The music is great and different for every zone, and the special effects are also of a high level of quality. The controls are simple and include just the directional buttons and a jump key. Of course, you can use a joypad or joystick if you wish. Gameplay is extremely addictive, as every room is practically a puzzle you have to overcome, with the 1-hour timer adding to the tension. You can choose between 2 levels of difficulty, normal for a 5 lives challenge, or easy for infinite lives mode. Let's see the rankings now, and the graphics receive a 9.5. The controls a 9.3. The music and sound effects a 9.4. And the gameplay a 9.6 for a total of 9.5, and of course the title of the Game of the Week. A true gem for the ZX Spectrum Next library that you shouldn't miss. Welcome to this new section of our show, and let's begin our first adventure review with Snarl, by BeyondBooleans. This is a horror point-and-click adventure game that puts you in the place of Will Stanhope, a Massachusetts PD detective that is stuck in a nightmare situation at a diner stop. The game is actually a prequel to two other adventure games called Obsession, that is out on Steam, and Teeth of Glass, that you can find on itch.io. As such, the game is a bit short, but trust us when we say that what lacks in duration makes up for atmosphere, horror, and gameplay. The game is played mostly like a Sierra Online game, and especially like the first Gabriel night. The user interface is pretty simple and intuitive, and you'll get right into it. The graphics are great, with big sprites and pretty impressive animations. The areas you explore are wonderfully designed, and the dread and horror in the atmosphere is achieved masterfully. There's a great music soundtrack, and the sound effects are also of the same great level. The story is great and tense, and I could say that it stands somewhere between a Clive Barker and a Stephen King story. In our adventure games rankings, it stands as such. Graphics 9.4, music and sound effects 9.3, story 9.6, gameplay 9.5, user interface 9.3, and the total is a 9.4. You should definitely try it out before moving on to the sequels. This is an adventuring experience that you must enjoy. Our Retrospect adventure game review today presents one of our favorite classic Sierra Online adventure games, Quest for Glory 4 Shadows of Darkness. This game is the apex for the Quest of Glory series, and it comes with the best atmosphere and graphics. The game also features full speeds for the dialogues and the narrator, who is voiced by John Rhys Davies, that is perfectly recorded with a huge dose of black humor. The user interface is the evolved 90s Sierra interface, and it's easy to use, and if you've ever played a Sierra adventure game of that era, you'll feel right at home. Of course, the Quest for Glory series is not just about adventuring, but also about role-playing as well, and Shadows of Darkness does not disappoint, as it comes with a very good combat system that allows you to fight your own battles, or if you just wish to play the game as a pure adventure experience, you can let the computer do all the fighting for you. Of course, you get to level up and increase your character's skills depending on your class that you choose at the beginning. And let's not forget the option to import a ready-made character from the previous game that comes with some perks. The graphics are in Super VGA mode and are simply stunning, almost art. The animation is great, and the music, the sound effects and the speeds are of top quality. This was truly one of Sierra's finest moments, even if the game came out with a great number of bugs that you don't have to tolerate nowadays, since there is an enhanced version patch to use that corrects every single problem. The rankings are as follows: Graphics 9.7, Music and Sound Effects 9.5, Story 9.3, Gameplay 9.6, User Interface 9.4, and a total of 9.5. If you haven't played it before, and if you want to try one of Quest for Glory games, this is the one to go. Check it out for yourselves. Our last review is of a short but greatly crafted text adventure named Paranoid by Patrik Airosto-Gelin. This game is written using the Quest engine, and it comes with a dark and interesting story. The text parser is good enough, but it could use a little more complexity in the vocabulary. Granted, this is Patrik's first game, though it is a first effort of very high quality, as the main strength in a text adventure game is the story, and in that it won't disappoint the player. You play a character with a dark secret and, well, I can't reveal much as I could ruin the story for you, and trust me when I say you must experience it. The game has good and detailed descriptions of the areas, and puzzles are good and never irrational, which is often an Achilles heel in this type of game. The game is short in duration, but you have a feeling of satisfaction when you finish it. The text adventure ranking, of course, has to be different and is as follows: Parser 8, Story 9.4, Duration 7, Puzzles 9, for a total of 8.35. The text adventure games are a forgotten species nowadays, and it's truly sad because I always consider them an evolution of novels, and this one is worth exploring. You won't regret it. Our hardware review this week presents the Sinden Light Gun. This is probably the finest and most convenient way to play your light gun emulated games on modern systems. It's a sturdy light gun, heavy enough to feel solid, but not too heavy to tire you. It uses a standard USB port to connect to your system, and no external adapter is required. It comes with an auto or manual moving arm mechanism, 4 buttons and a cross that comes in handy for menu and option selections, and of course reloading. The light gun uses a camera system as opposed to the old classic light sensing diode method. But enough chit chat. Let's go put the controller to the test. Come on! We must mention that we are using this on Batocera Linux system, as the settings to adjust the light gun properly on a Windows system are quite complex and it doesn't really perform that good. Here though, it's a proper delight. Now to begin, we can use the options buttons to choose our type of game and move along the menus with a cross. Of course, it's much more fun to choose by shooting the menu of your choice. And off we go. The light gun responds very good, and the auto-loading mechanism provides a level of realism. Of course, it's been more than 50 years since I last played a light gun game, so cut me some slack. I'll get into it again. Now bear in mind that you need to keep a certain distance from the screen for the light gun to read the image properly and aim correctly. Okay, let's try this again. There, much better now, and it seems like I get the hang of it again. The auto-loading sound provides a shoot-like feeling that makes it more exciting or annoying depending on your taste. The setup of the light gun in Batosora was automatic, and besides choosing it as a preferred controller method in the settings, there was no other action needed for it to work flawlessly. It's really worth it, and it brings back fun memories. Okay, let's move on. Now, the Sinden Light Gun has a bit of a steep price, but it's still positioned rationally price-wise compared to the other alternatives. The only downside is that it really has some serious issues setting it up on a Windows system. Of course, most people use an OS like Batosora for their emulator all-in-one need nowadays, so I guess it's not that big a deal. The Sinden Light Gun is a great well-built light gun controller, and if you don't mind fiddling with the Windows interface settings or you're using an all-in-one Linux, this is the way to go. Our first review from the vault this week reveals an amazing futuristic game, Slipspeed by Voxel. This is a top-down view racing game in the spirit of games like Badlands, and it comes in server or full form. There is also a boxed version available. The first thing you'll notice is the amazing fast animation and the wonderful Super VGA graphics. The game really runs like an arcade game from the mid-90s, and it looks amazing. It's accompanied by an incredible soundtrack that will keep you on your toes, not to mention that there is a different soundtrack for different racing tracks. And speaking of racing tracks, there are 16 amazing ones to try to race and conquer first place. The controls are based on physics and inertia, and this makes the game more exciting, as you must learn to control your vehicle depending on the speed, track form, and obstacles in your path. Speaking of vehicles, you get to choose from a variety of them, and by collecting cash on the racing tracks, you can upgrade their characteristics such as top speed, acceleration, turning ability, etc. The rankings are: graphics 9.2, controls 9, music and sound effects 9.7, gameplay 9.4, for a total of 9.3. Slipspeed is an amazing and thrilling game that really deserves your attention, and we cannot recommend it enough. In our Retrospect review this week, we have a game that was destined to become a great hit, but due to various circumstances, it became an also-ran. We are talking about Blake Stone, Aliens of Gold by Apogee Software. Blake Stone is a 1994 FPS game that came just about the time that the FPS craze was about to take off. It utilized the Wolfenstein 3D engine to deliver an exciting and quite different experience than its predecessor. You play as a future British super agent named Blake Stone, and you take on Dr. Pyrrhus Goldfire, who tries with an army of mutated aliens and goons to take over the world. Okay, so the story is not Oscar material, but the game was a totally different recipe than the myriads Wolf 3D games that came out at the time, and it soon became a cult hit only for its rise to fame to be crushed by the coming of the behemoth that was Doom. The graphics engine has been significantly updated, and it runs really smoothly, with more textures, a great variety of enemy sprites, and a cool selection of weapons, overall giving the game a much better look than Wolf 3D. There is greater interaction with the environment, with computer console access and various traps and energy wall switches, and the game in total feels much more alive than its progeny. Blake Stone is such a beloved game that it even has a modern upgrade by the community in a mod form, and let us tell you, it looks really good. To the rankings now, with graphics receiving a 9. The controls receive a 9. The music and sound effects an 8.7. The gameplay a 9.1. For a total of 8.95. A cult gem that, if you're a retro fan of the FPSs, will offer you a great time. Today we're going to delve into the first line of compatible computers ever to conquer our hearts. And no, they weren't the IBM PC compatibles. Today we're talking about the MSX. Back in the early 80s, the big companies that were clashing for the top spot in our hearts and our wallets were Atari with 8-bit line of computers, Texas Instruments with the T94-4 and T99-48, that was maybe the worst marketing name ever, we think, and of course the big boss, Jack Tramiel's Commodore, with the VIC-20 and the newly introduced Commodore 64. Even though it was Jack that started a fierce price war against his competitors, a price war that resulted in Texas Instruments abandoning the computer manufacturing market altogether, he did not consider the other two companies the real enemy. No, the real enemy was the Japanese. He believed that the Japanese had developed enough technical ability to invade the American and British-dominated computers market and steal their customers. He just couldn't pinpoint the secret weapon with which they were about to do it. Well, even though the so-called Japanese computers invasion was not the evil master plan that Jack was imagining, there was indeed a design in the works, and with the assistance of an all-American company nonetheless. ASCII Corporation was a Japanese company that was a publisher of a computer magazine and various video games. During the early 80s, it managed to acquire a license to distribute Microsoft BASIC in Japan, and that led to an interest in computer production. Bill Gates at the time was looking for a way to infiltrate the Japanese market, a feat quite hard for a Western company even today. That collaboration between Microsoft and ASCII Corporation led to the meeting of Bill Gates and Kazuhiko Nishi and the eventual creation of the MSX project. Right from the beginning, the MSX project was based on the recent success of the VHS format in the home video industry. The basic premise was to create a standard for a computer that, in order to be licensed for manufacturing, it had to have a minimum of technical characteristics with chipsets fully compatible amongst them. The MSX standard was introduced in Japan on June 1983, and Mitsubishi was the first company to buy a license to produce its own MSX computer. The MSX was based mostly on the Spectra Video SV328 computer, a business machine by the American company Spectra Video that enjoyed some success both in the US and Japan at the time. The internals by which its licensee had to comply were mostly the standard fare at the time, even though some corners were cut to make the standard affordable and profitable at the same time. The MSX system had to have a Z80 main processor by Zilog, at least 8 kilobytes of memory, although almost all systems came with at least 32K, the TMS19918 Texas Instrument video chipset, or a fully compatible equivalent, the General Instruments AY38910 sound chip, and finally at least one cartridge slot, one joystick port, an interface for a tape recorder, and if possible, a disk drive, and of course, Microsoft BASIC as the main operating system. Of course, most of the circuits dictated by the standard could be found anywhere on any other system on the market at the time. For example, the Z80 was the go-to processor for most home computers during the 80s, but it was the combination of all of the above, bound together by Microsoft BASIC as the main OS, that brought the standard to life. The machine was an immediate hit in Japan, that at the time relied in bulky PC-style systems, mostly by NEC and Sharp, to fill the gap of a home system. Soon, many major Japanese manufacturers hopped on to the MSX boat, including but not limited to Sony, Panasonic, Fujitsu, Yamaha, Toshiba, and many more. Sony especially was a keen supporter of the standard and even had a hand in its creation in a way to make up for the loss of the video standard to JVC. Many famous nowadays Japanese companies cut their teeth on the MSX platforms, companies like Konami and Hudson Soft. The Japanese global invasion was about to begin, but it didn't go as planned. For starters, in Europe, that after 1983 and the US video game market crash, the UK computers became the dominant force the world over. Even the American companies like Commodore and Atari put on more weight to compete with the likes of ZX Spectrum than they did on their home market competitors. The British homemakers' revolution was in full gear, and it looked like the perfect time for the MSX to find a place amongst them. Instead, switching sides was granted a high risk for almost all European companies except Philips, which was the only one to buy a license and bring its own MSX computers on the market. It's not that the MSX was a failure in Europe, though. It did enjoy significant success in some countries, like Spain and obviously Netherlands. But for the rest of Europe, it was seen as a more advanced ZX Spectrum clone. And they weren't completely wrong, as most of the titles available at the time in Europe were Spectrum games just with better sound and no color class. And what about the US? At the time, and because of the price wars initiated by Jack Tramiel and the impact of the video games market crash, the US market was a cutthroat area, and all the Japanese licensees avoided to take any serious action to invest big time in an American infiltration. As such, the MSX sold less in the US market than anywhere else in the world. To make matters worse, Kazuhiko Nishi, widely considered the father of the MSX, had a fallout with Bill Gates, who started to set his sights on the PC market through the MS-DOS platform, and the deal between the ASCII Corporation and Microsoft fell apart. ASCII, though, kept going on its own, and to rectify some of the complaints about the MSX being a rich man's Spectrum, went back to the drawing board and came up with the MSX2 standard. So by 1985, the specs were upgraded. It kept the Z80 as its main processor, but upgraded the main memory to a minimum of 64K, with most manufacturers providing now up to 512K. The Yamaha V9938, a much more powerful video chipset that far surpassed anything any other 8-bit system could provide at the time, NES and SG-1000 included. Yamaha YM2149 sound chipset with FM synthesis and advanced sound capabilities, a clock chip, and finally 2 joystick ports along with the usual cartridge slot and tape recorder interface. The MSX2 was an 8-bit powerhouse, and it made the standard even more popular in Japan. But in Europe, the MSX was about to be superseded again, as Atari ST was around the corner, with the famous Amiga 1000 and Amiga 500 a while later, starting the 16-bit revolution. And these machines were way more powerful and advanced than anything the MSX2 standard could offer. Even more advanced standards were created to cope with that, such as the MSX2 Plus and the MSX Turbo R, that was a pure 16-bit machine. But they never left Japan officially, and by 1990, the writing was on the wall. The MSX was the world's first widely available computer standard way before anyone bothered with the PC compatibles. It was ahead of its time with a forward-thinking philosophy that provided the users with similar experiences across different computers. It did not become the Japanese domination invasion that Jack Tramiel was afraid of back in the early 80s, but that was not the purpose from the start. The purpose always was to provide the end user with homogeneous experience no matter what the manufacturer, and in that, its legacy lives on today's computers that we own at home.